fermentation is now used to produce everything from high-intensity sweeteners to enzymes. But if the bioeconomy is really going to take off, do we need to pay more attention to the feedstocks that are fueling this trend?
Stays of the industry are corn sugar, so dextrose 95. Some companies use sucrose from sugarcane, but the majority dextrose 95.
And what is the issue with that?
Corn wet mills are really water and carbon intensive.
Yes.
And so if you've looked at some of the LCAs that are publicly available from other precision fermentation companies, the carbon footprint of the feedstock can be like 80% of the LCA. It's pretty intense. And this is crazy because it depends on perspective. The cost is a problem too. The cheapest corn dextrose from a co-located facility can be $400 a ton. But if you're making isoprene, for example, and your yield is 25%, by the time that you've paid for your feedstock, you already reached the price of isoprene.
Yes.
And so there's been decades of research to get corn dextrose to be cheaper, and it's not getting any cheaper. And now we're really at a stage where it's like, if we want to make chemicals, foods, materials that are cheaper than their carbon intensive incumbents, something has to be cheaper, and that's feedstock.
The sugary wastewater that can power your process, where is it coming from?
So we actually are working with two different waste streams. The wastewater that comes from food processors, but most recently, since we last chatted, we realized that the same food processors are actually generating significantly more solid biomass waste. So we're working with both of those waste streams, but effectively coming straight from the process where they've already been pre-processed or homogenized in one way or another. It ends up solving a big problem in the upcycling space to have such consistent streams. But working with industries all over, whether it's breweries, food processors in the commodity spaces, and then also end products like ice cream, cookies, bread makers, etc.
So what's your secret sauce though? What are you doing to the water? Removing stuff from the water which you process through your platform, and what then returning kind of fresh water for reuse? Or?
Yeah, with the wastewater streams that we're working with, we're effectively doing the opposite of what membranes would want to use. At manufacturing facilities, people use membranes to clean water for use in like RO systems that require very clean water for the process. We use those membranes backwards. So we want the sugars that come from the wastewater. And so what we do is we've developed a process that uses membrane separations to remove as much of the sugar as possible, return very, very clean water. So we save the manufacturers both on wastewater treatment costs and on clean water costs. But what's interesting is that in many processes that require membranes, like the flocculation steps and all the pre-treatment steps that come before membranes, you end up losing a lot of your sugar. And so what we've done is created a process that doesn't lose sugar and actually allows us to capture as much of that sugar at the end of the stream as possible.
And in terms of the end market then for that sugar, I mean, would it make most sense for your business model if you've got a facility that's kind of co-located? Or
Yeah, you know what? Any co-location is going to be beneficial because it's sort of like not a greenfield construction. But what's going to end up happening for our company is that we're going to be building aggregation facilities that bring in waste from regional hubs. And so like looking at the Dakotas and California and the Northeast and the Southeast as hubs. And then we will use those facilities to co-locate with fermenters, because effectively we reduce the price of freight of liquids. And that's pretty expensive.
So how have you funded the company so far, and how challenging is it to raise money in the current climate?
So we've raised about $11 million in venture capital to date. Our pre-seed lead was the Engine out of MIT. Our seed was led by Synthesis Capital, which is a niche investor in the fermentation space, leading back to the very beginnings of the Beyond Meats back at CPT Capital. But I would say, so our seed round, we raised $9 million. We did it end to end in about 5 months. It was relatively quick for the environment, and I really think it's because there's been so much funding that has gone into the precision fermentation technologies themselves, but less so on the enabling technologies piece. So people are looking at their portfolios and seeing like, these companies don't have a line of sight to economics that are positive, and so let's fund companies that will allow that unlock to happen too.
So what kind of progress have you made so far?
So we've been working with the wastewater streams from various different food processors, have developed really strong relationships in the field, have discovered that there's other waste streams that are high opportunity that will let us effectively, instead of supply one commercial scale fermenter per region, like 15 to 25 commercial scale fermenters per region. So right now we have worked on the wastewater to feedstocks side of the platform, and now working on development of solid waste to feedstocks platform and integrating both of those pretty much by the end of the year.
So what about, the biggest barriers to progress? I guess both for you and for this broader kind of precision fermentation industry. What are you hearing from people you're working with?
You know what? I think we're coming out of a stage where it was vertical integration so that you can capture the IP and the economic upside and stuff like that. But right now, really where the industry needs to go is in collaborations. And so I think some of the barriers to entry there are thinking about things a little bit differently and putting in capital to do that. And so for our end of things, the cheaper feedstock we can create usually doesn't have a DE95 replacement profile. It'll be a mix of C5 and C6 sugars. And so a barrier to entry there is working with fermenters that really want to lower their cost, but helping their strains consume as much of our feedstock as possible. So there's a lot of different things we're doing in that regard, but that's hard, right?
I mean, do you mean we need a broader range of kind of microbial hosts that can actually handle this more flexible range of feedstocks than we have at the moment?
Yes, and the current hosts that are in production and in development, we need to understand their metabolic flexibility. So I think a lot of research has gone into tighter, but less so into how far can I push this microbe to perform. And so that's kind of the stage that we're at right now.